The door shut with a finality that made Nora's heart sink like a stone in still water. She heard the heavy iron bolt slide into place, then her father's boots walking away down the hall, each step deliberate and final. The floorboards creaked under his weight, a sound she'd known all her life but which now filled her with dread. Nora Wright pressed her palms against the rough pine door, feeling the splinters catch at her skin. 19 years old and trapped like a rabbit in a snare. Through the small window high on the wall, she could see the Colorado sky darkening, stars beginning to show themselves one by one. Just 3 nights ago, she'd been free to walk under those stars. Now she was a prisoner in her own home. It had started with the banker. Samuel Morrison had ridden out from town Tuesday afternoon, his black suit dusty from the trail. Nora had been hanging wash when he arrived, and she'd watched from behind the sheets as her father met him at the gate. Their voices carried on the wind. Talk of overdue payments, final notices, foreclosure, words that meant nothing good. "Get inside, girl," her father had called to her, and she'd obeyed, as she always did. Abner Wright was not a man who tolerated disobedience. She'd busied herself with supper preparations, trying not to listen to the raised voices from the front room. But when the shouting stopped sudden-like, when there was a thud, and then silence, she couldn't help but peek through the crack in the kitchen door. The banker lay still on the floor, a dark stain spreading beneath his head. Her father stood over him, breathing hard, the iron poker from the fireplace still in his hand. Their eyes met across that terrible distance. In that moment, Nora saw something change in her father's face, saw him realize what she'd witnessed, saw him understand what that meant. "Papa," she'd whispered. He'd moved fast for a man his age, crossing the room in 3 strides. His hand, still warm from gripping the poker, closed around her arm. "You saw nothing," he'd said, his voice low and dangerous. "You understand me. Girl, nothing." But they both knew the truth. She'd seen everything. That night, he'd buried Morrison out behind the barn, in the spot where they'd planted the apple trees that never took. Nora had watched from her bedroom window as he worked by lantern light, the shovel rising and falling in steady rhythm. When he was done, he'd stood there a long while, looking at the freshly turned earth, before walking back to the house. The next morning, he'd been different, watched her over breakfast with calculating eyes. When she'd tried to go out to feed the chickens, he'd stopped her. "Best you stay inside today," he'd said, "storm's coming." But the sky had been clear as glass. By evening, he'd made his decision. When she'd gone to her room after supper, he'd followed. She'd turned at the threshold, confused, and he'd pushed her inside. Before she could speak, the door was closing, the bolt sliding home. "Papa!" She'd pounded on the door until her fists ached. "Papa, please let me out." "It's for your own good," he'd called through the wood. "Just for a few days, till things settle. Can't have you running off to town, talking to folks. Not till I figure what to do." That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of meals pushed through a gap at the bottom of the door. 3 days of using the chamber pot in the corner, of washing from the basin with the water he brought once a day. 3 days of growing certainty that a few days was a lie, that he was never going to let her out. Because what else could he do? She knew his secret. She'd seen him take a man's life, seen him hide the body. If she ever got free, if she ever told anyone. No, he couldn't risk it. She understood that now, understood it with a cold clarity that made her stomach turn. Her own father, the man who'd bounced her on his knee and called her his little songbird, was going to keep her locked away forever. Or worse. The room was small, just big enough for a narrow bed, a dresser, and a chair. The walls were papered with a pattern of tiny roses that her mother had chosen years ago, before the fever took her. Nora ran her fingers over those roses now, remembering her mother's gentle hands smoothing the paper, her voice humming some half-remembered tune. "You're growing into such a fine young woman," her mother had said, not long before the end. "Promise me you'll be strong. Nora, promise me you'll find your own way in this world." She'd promised, but how could she keep that promise locked in this room? The window was too small to climb through, even if she could reach it. She'd tried standing on the chair, but could barely get her head through the opening. The door was solid pine, the bolt on the outside heavy iron. The walls were thick, built to keep out winter cold and summer heat. Her father had built this house strong, built it to last, built it to be a fortress. Now it was her prison. On the third night, desperation drove her to the fireplace. It was small, meant only to warm the room on cold nights, but it shared a chimney with the kitchen stove below. If she could make enough smoke, maybe someone would see. Maybe someone would come to investigate. She gathered what she could burn, pages torn from her Bible, hair ribbons, a handkerchief, lit them with the matches her father had forgotten to remove. The smoke was acrid, made her eyes water, but she fed the tiny fire everything she could spare. Then she heard it, hoofbeats approaching. Someone was coming. Her heart leaped. She pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. A man's voice, unfamiliar, asking about grain and water for his horses. A traveler. Then, someone just passing through. "Please," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her. "Please help me." She heard her father's voice, cautious but polite. Heard them negotiate a price for feed and supplies. Heard footsteps on the porch, the door opening. They were inside the house now, below her. If she could just make some noise, just let this stranger know she was here. She grabbed the chair and swung it against the door with all her strength. The crash echoed through the room. She swung again, and again, until the chair leg cracked. "What was that?" The stranger's voice, sharp with suspicion. "Just the wind," her father replied smoothly. "Old house settles something fierce. You want that grain or not?" Nora's hope died like a flame in rain. She sank to the floor, the broken chair falling from her hands. Below, she heard the business conclude, heard the stranger leave, heard the hoofbeats fade into distance. Her father's footsteps on the stairs were slow, measured. He stopped outside her door. "That was foolish, girl," he said quietly. "Very foolish. You best remember, there's only one way this ends if you keep making trouble, and it ain't the way you want." She didn't answer. What was there to say? After he left, she sat in the gathering darkness, watching the stars appear through her small window. Somewhere out there, that stranger was riding on, unaware that a woman needed saving. Somewhere out there, the world went on spinning, people living their lives in freedom. She thought of the banker, Morrison, lying under the apple trees that never grew. Thought of how quickly a life could end, how easily a person could disappear. Her father had done it once. He could do it again. But she wouldn't give up, couldn't give up. Her mother had asked her to be strong, to find her own way, even locked in this room, even facing the unthinkable. She had to try. Tomorrow, she would try again, and the day after that, and every day until she found a way to freedom, or... She didn't finish the thought. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, a lonely sound that echoed her own heart. She was Nora Wright, daughter of a killer, prisoner in her own home. But she was also her mother's daughter, and she would not surrender. Not yet, not ever. The door remained locked, the bolt secure, but behind it, in the darkness of that small room, a young woman began to plan. Miles Harper had been riding since dawn, the Colorado sun climbing steady behind him as he guided his wagon along the dusty trail. 28 years old, with hands scarred from rope burns and eyes that had seen too much. He made his living hauling goods between the settlements scattered like seeds across the territory. It was honest work, lonesome but free, and after his years in the cavalry, that freedom meant everything. The horses were tired, their heads hanging low. When he spotted the Wright ranch in the distance, a modest spread. Nothing fancy, just a 2-story house. a barn that had seen better days, and a scattering of outbuildings. Good enough place to rest the horses, maybe buy some grain if the price was fair. He'd heard talk of Abner Wright in the towns, a hard man who'd carved out his piece of land through sheer stubbornness after his wife passed. Kept to himself mostly. Had a daughter nobody saw much anymore. Miles figured that was their business. Out here, folks valued their privacy, and he respected that. The sun was high when he pulled up to the gate. The place felt strange, somehow. Too quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. No chickens scratching in the yard. No movement behind the windows. Just stillness and dust and the weight of noon heat. "Hello, the house," he called out, standing beside his wagon. The front door opened, slow. And Abner Wright stepped onto the porch. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with gray threading through his beard and eyes that didn't quite meet Miles's own. "Help you." Wright's voice was neither friendly nor hostile, just careful. "Miles Harper," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "Running supplies up to Denver. My horses need water and rest, and I could use some grain if you've got it to spare. I pay fair price." Wright studied him for a long moment, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "Got grain," he said finally. $2 a sack. It was high, but not unreasonable given how far they were from town. Miles nodded. "I'll take 3 sacks. Mind if I water the horses first?" "That trought's by the barn. Help yourself." As Miles tended to his team, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ranch showed signs of neglect. Fence posts leaning, tools left out to rust. Through the barn's open door, he could see a wagon with a broken wheel that had been sitting long enough for spiders to web it over. This wasn't like the Abner Wright he'd heard about, the man who kept everything in its place. When he returned to the house to complete the purchase, Wright invited him inside. The house was dark, curtains drawn against the day. It smelled of bacon grease and something else, something sharp like fear sweat. Wright led him to the kitchen, where sacks of grain were stacked against the wall. That's when Miles heard it, a muffled thump from somewhere above, like something hitting wood. "What was that?" he asked, instinct making his hand drift toward his hip, though he wasn't wearing his gun. Wright's face never changed. "Just the wind. Old house settles something fierce. You want that grain or not?" Another thump. Deliberate this time. 3 strikes in quick succession. Miles felt the hair on his neck rise. That wasn't any settling house. That was someone trying to get attention. "Sounds like you got rats in the walls," he said carefully, watching Wright's face. "Could be." Wright's hand had moved too, resting casual-like near a kitchen knife. "We done here." They were 2 men measuring each other across a kitchen table, each reading the danger in the other. Miles had learned in the war to trust his instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming. But he was unarmed, alone, and didn't know what he was walking into. "I reckon we are," he said finally, pulling out his money. He loaded the grain quick, aware of Wright watching from the porch. As he climbed onto the wagon seat, he took one last look at the house. In an upstairs window, just for a second, he thought he saw movement. A pale face pressed against glass, there and gone like a ghost. Miles drove away, but the image stuck with him. A mile down the road, he pulled off into a stand of cottonwoods and sat thinking, could have been anything. Could have been Wright's daughter, the one folks said kept to the house. Could have been his imagination. But those thumps hadn't been imagination. Someone in that house had been trying to signal him. He thought about riding on, minding his own business. It would be the smart thing. Whatever was happening at the right place wasn't his concern. He had goods to deliver, money to make. Getting involved in other folks' troubles was a sure way to find trouble of your own. But he kept seeing that face in the window, kept hearing those deliberate thumps. In the cavalry, he'd learned that the difference between a live soldier and a dead one was often just listening to that little voice that said something wasn't right. Something wasn't right at the Wright ranch. As the afternoon wore on, he made camp by a stream, letting the horses graze while he thought it through. He could ride back after dark, scout the place, just to settle his mind, just to make sure he wasn't leaving someone in trouble. He'd known men like Wright during the war, men who'd gotten a taste for control, for having power over others. They were dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with courage or skill. They were dangerous because they'd cross lines other men wouldn't, do things that would turn a decent person's stomach. When full dark came, Miles picketed the horses and walked back toward the ranch. He'd left his wagon and goods behind if something went wrong. He wanted to be able to move fast. The moon was new, just a sliver, which suited him fine. He'd learned to move quiet in the dark, learned it staying alive behind enemy lines. The house was mostly dark when he reached it. Just one lamp burning in what he figured was the kitchen. He circled wide, checking the barn first. Wright's horse was there, along with something that made his blood chill, a black gelding with a silver-studded saddle. He'd seen that horse before, in town. It belonged to Samuel Morrison, the banker. But Morrison wasn't anywhere to be found. Miles crept closer to the house, staying low. Through a crack in the curtains, he could see Wright at the kitchen table, drinking from a bottle. The man's face was haggard, his movements sharp and nervous. He kept glancing at the stairs, like he was watching for something, or someone. Moving careful as a cat, Miles circled to the back of the house. There, the window he'd seen the face in, second floor, north side. The window was small, but there was a trellis running up the wall. Probably for roses once upon a time. It looked sturdy enough to hold a man's weight. He was halfway up when he heard the humming, soft, sweet, drifting through the window like a prayer. A woman's voice, young and sad. He pulled himself level with the window and peered in. The girl, for she couldn't be more than 19 or 20, sat on a narrow bed, humming to herself in the darkness. Even in the dim light, he could see she was pretty in that worn-down way of ranch women, with long dark hair and a face meant for smiling. But there was no smile now, just a terrible resignation. He tapped soft on the window. She jumped, the humming cut short, and turned to stare at him with wide eyes. "Don't scream," he whispered urgently. "I'm here to help." She was at the window in 2 strides, pressing her hands against the glass. "You came back," she breathed, and there were tears on her cheeks. "I prayed you would come back. Can you open the window?" She shook her head. "It's painted shut. Has been for years." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The door's locked from outside. He's keeping me prisoner. 3 days now. Please, you have to help me. He's done something terrible, and I saw it, and now—" "What's your name?" "Nora Wright. He's my father, but he's not right anymore. Not since Mama died." Miles tested the window frame. The paint was thick, years of layers. He'd need tools to get it open, and that would make noise. Too much noise. "I'll get you out," he promised. "But I need to be smart about it. Is he armed?" "Always. Keeps a shotgun by the door and a pistol on his hip. Mister, you don't know how dangerous he is. He killed—" She stopped, fear flickering across her face. "Morrison, the banker." Her eyes went wide. "How did you—" "His horse is in the barn. I put it together." Miles glanced down, making sure Wright wasn't prowling the yard. "Listen to me, Nora. I'm going to get you out, but I need to wait for the right moment. He's drinking. Maybe he'll pass out." "He won't. He's been drinking for 3 days and barely sleeping. He's waiting for something. I think he's trying to decide what to do with me." The way she said it made Miles's gut clench. He'd seen enough evil to recognize when someone was in mortal danger. "Tomorrow," he said firmly. "I'll come back tomorrow with help." "The sheriff—" "No," her voice was urgent. "Sheriff Dalton is his cousin. Half the town owes him favors or money. You can't trust anyone there. Please, it has to be tonight. I heard him talking to himself earlier. He said sometimes hard choices have to be made. Said it would be merciful. Quick." Miles cursed under his breath. No law to turn to, a desperate woman, and a man downstairs who'd already killed once. This was the kind of situation that got people dead. But he looked into Nora Wright's eyes and knew he couldn't ride away. Not again. "All right," he said. "Tonight. Be ready." The chimney smoke had been Nora's desperate gambit, and it worked better than she'd dared hope. For 3 days, she'd been planning, thinking, praying for some way to signal the outside world. The shared chimney was her only connection to the kitchen below, and she'd remembered something her mother once said about wet cloth making thick smoke. She'd torn strips from her petticoat, soaked them in the wash basin, and fed them careful-like into the small fireplace. The smoke that resulted was thick and acrid, nothing like normal wood smoke. It poured up the chimney and out into the sky, and down through the shared flue into the kitchen below. When Miles Harper had arrived that morning, she'd been ready. Now, hours after he'd left, she prepared for what was to come. She could hear her father moving about downstairs, his footsteps heavier than usual. The bottle. She knew. He'd been drinking steady since Morrison, trying to drown something that wouldn't stay under. She'd torn more strips from her clothing, braided them into a crude rope. It wouldn't hold her weight, but maybe it could be useful somehow. She'd broken a leg off the chair, hidden it under her mattress. A poor weapon, but better than nothing. And she'd written a letter on a page torn from her Bible, explaining everything, just in case. Just in case she didn't make it out alive. The hours crawled by like wounded things. She watched the window, straining to hear any sound beyond her father's restless pacing. When full dark came, she positioned herself by the door, listening. Then she heard it, the crash of breaking glass from somewhere below. Her father's voice, cursing, heavy footsteps running, a door slamming. Someone was pounding on her door, but from the outside, working at the bolt. Her heart hammered as the metal scraped and protested. Then the door swung open, and Miles Harper stood there, breathing hard, a crowbar in his hand. "We need to go, now." She didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. She grabbed the small bundle she'd prepared, just her mother's Bible and a change of clothes, and followed him into the hallway. "Where's my father?" Chasing shadows in the barn, I threw a bottle through the window, made him think someone was trying to steal his horses. Won't fool him long. They flew down the stairs, Nora's bare feet silent on the wood. The front door stood open, cold night air rushing in. Freedom was just steps away. Then Abner Wright appeared in the doorway, shotgun in his hands. "Going somewhere, daughter?" Miles pushed Nora behind him, raising the crowbar. "Let her go, Wright! This doesn't have to end bad." Wright laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "End bad, boy. It ended bad the minute she saw what she wasn't meant to see. You think I can let her go spreading tales? About Morrison, everyone already knows he's missing. His horse is in your barn. Missing ain't the same as dead. Missing men come back sometimes. Dead ones stay buried." Wright's eyes were wild, unfocused. "You shouldn't have come back. Harper, now you're part of it too." "Papa, please." Nora stepped out from behind Miles. "I won't tell anyone. I swear it. Just let us go." "Can't do that. Girl, you know I can't." The shotgun wavered between them. "Your mama would understand. She always said I was too trusting, too soft." "Well, I ain't soft anymore." Miles saw it in the man's eyes, the moment before decision, the tightening that meant violence was coming. He'd seen it too many times before. Without thinking, he threw the crowbar, hard and straight. It caught Wright in the shoulder, spinning him half around. The shotgun went off, blast of sound and fire. Pellets tearing into the door frame inches from Miles's head. Then Wright was falling, clutching his shoulder, the gun clattering away across the floor. "Run!" Miles grabbed Nora's hand and they burst through the door into the night. His horses were where he'd left them, tied to the fence post near the road. He'd saddled both earlier, planning for this moment. He boosted Nora onto the mare, swung up on his gelding. Behind them, Wright stumbled onto the porch, shouting curses into the darkness. But they were already moving, horses stretching into a gallop, the night swallowing them whole. They rode hard for an hour, following trails Miles knew from his freight runs. Only when they reached Willow Creek did he slow, letting the horses drink while he listened for pursuit. "He'll come after us," Nora said quietly. She sat the horse well for a town girl, back straight despite her exhaustion. "He can't let me go, not knowing what I know." "Then we keep riding, get you somewhere safe." "Where he knows everyone in 3 counties, has friends, people who owe him." Miles considered. She was right. They couldn't just ride into the nearest town and expect help. They needed distance, needed to get somewhere Wright's influence didn't reach. "Cheyenne," he said finally. "It's 2 days' ride, but I know people there. Good people who won't be swayed by your father's money or threats." She was quiet for a moment, looking back the way they'd come. "I've never been further than town, never been anywhere, really." "Well, now you're going to Cheyenne." He tried to make it sound like an adventure instead of a desperate flight. "Ever seen a real city?" "No." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Mama used to tell me about Denver, where she grew up. Said there were so many people you could walk all day and never see the same face twice." "Cheyenne's not quite that big, but it's something. Gas lights on the main streets, hotels with real glass windows, stores that sell things you've never dreamed of." They rode on, following the creek north. The moon had set, leaving only stars to light their way, but Miles knew this country. He'd hauled freight through here dozens of times, knew every trail and camping spot. An hour before dawn, they stopped in a grove of aspens. Miles had supplies in his saddlebags, hardtack, jerky, a canteen of water. They ate in silence, both too tired for talk. "We should rest a few hours," he said. "Horses need it, and so do you." "What about you?" "I'll keep watch, sleep easier knowing someone's awake." She curled up against a tree, using her bundle as a pillow. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Miles sat with his back to another tree, watching the lightening sky and thinking about what he'd done. He'd assaulted a man, helped a potential witness escape. If Wright had the law in his pocket like Nora said, there'd be wanted posters soon. Miles Harper, horse thief and kidnapper. They'd hang him if they caught him, no questions asked. But looking at the girl sleeping there, young and scared and brave all at once, he couldn't regret it. He'd seen too many people fail to do the right thing when it mattered. Seen too many good folks look the other way when evil was being done. He wouldn't be one of them. The sun was well up when Nora stirred. She sat up, confused for a moment. Then memory flooded back. "How long did I sleep?" 3 hours, give or take. Feel better." "Yes." She looked around the grove, at the horses grazing peacefully. "It's pretty here, peaceful. Most of the world is when you get away from people." She studied him then, really looking for the first time. "Why did you come back? You didn't owe me anything. You could have just ridden on." Miles shrugged. "Didn't sit right, leaving you there. Saw your face in that window. Heard you trying to signal. Man would have to be made of stone to ride away from that." "Most men would have." "Maybe, maybe not. Like to think there's still some good folks in the world." She was quiet for a moment. "I haven't thanked you proper for saving my life." "Don't thank me yet. We're not clear of this by a long shot." As if to underscore his words, they heard it then, hoofbeats in the distance. Not one rider, but several, coming fast along the creek trail. Miles was on his feet instantly. "Mount up! Quick now!" They swung into the saddles, Miles leading them deeper into the aspens. The trees were thick here. Good cover if they kept quiet. Through the white trunks, they could see the trail they'd followed. 4 men rode into view, Wright in the lead despite his injured shoulder. The others looked like hired hands, rough men with ready guns. They pulled up not 50 yards from where Miles and Nora hid. They came this way. One of the men said, "Tracks are fresh." Wright sat his horse stiffly, face gray with pain and exhaustion, but his eyes were alert, scanning the trees. "They're close. That cowboy don't know this country like we do. Check the grove." Miles's hand found his rifle, eased it from the saddle scabbard. 4 against 1, and him with Nora to protect. Not good odds, but if they were discovered. That's when they heard it. More hoofbeats, coming from the north. A lot more. "Riders coming," one of Wright's men said nervously. Around the bend came a sight that made Miles's heart lift. A freight wagon with 6 outriders, all armed. He recognized the lead rider, Tom Brennan, who ran supplies for the mining camps. Good man in a fight. Wright recognized him too. His face darkened as he realized what this meant. With witnesses around, he couldn't just gun down Miles and drag Nora home, not without questions being asked. "Morning, Abner." Brennan called out cheerfully. "You're out early. Lose some stock." "My daughter," Wright said smoothly. "Ran off in the night. Worried sick about her." "That's so." Brennan's eyes swept the grove, and Miles would have sworn they lingered on the spot where he and Nora hid. "Well, we'll keep an eye out. Young girls got to be careful on these trails. All sorts of dangers." The message was clear. Wright heard it too. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Appreciate it. Tom, we'll keep looking." "You do that." Brennan's hand rested casual-like on his pistol. "Safe travels, Abner." Wright had no choice. With a last savage look at the grove, he turned his horse. "Come on, boys. They must have doubled back." They rode away, but Miles knew it wasn't over. Wright would keep hunting, would never stop. Not with what Nora knew. The night was black as pitch when Miles kicked in the door of Nora's prison. The wood splintered under his boot, the sound cracking through the house like a gunshot. He'd waited until Abner Wright was good and drunk, watched through the window as the man nodded over his whiskey bottle. Now was the time. Nora stood in the doorway of her room, already dressed and ready, her face pale but determined. She'd heard him on the stairs, recognized his footsteps from earlier. Without a word, she grabbed the small bundle she'd prepared and followed him. They moved quick and quiet through the dark house. Miles had mapped it in his mind during his earlier visit. Stairs here, kitchen there, front door straight ahead. He'd left it open when he came in, ready for a fast exit. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, a floorboard creaked under his weight. In the front room, Wright stirred in his chair. "Who's there?" The man's voice was thick with drink, but alert enough. They heard the scrape of a chair, unsteady footsteps. Miles grabbed Nora's hand and pulled her toward the kitchen, the back door. They could circle around to where he'd left the horses. But Wright was faster than a drunk man had any right to be. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, oil lamp in one hand, pistol in the other. Well. His eyes glittered dangerous in the lamplight. "The helpful stranger returns. Come to steal from me. Have you come to right a wrong?" Miles said evenly. "Let her go. Wright, she's your daughter, not your property. She's a witness to a crime. That makes her my problem." Wright's pistol wavered between them. "And now you're my problem too, Cowboy." Nora stepped forward. "Papa, please. I won't tell anyone about Mr. Morrison. I swear it on Mama's grave." Wright's face twisted. "Don't you speak of your mother. She'd understand what needs doing. Family protects family." "This isn't protection," Nora said quietly. "This is madness." For a moment, Wright's face crumpled, and Miles saw the man he might have been once, before grief and guilt poisoned him. Then his expression hardened again. "Get back to your room. Girl, we'll discuss this in the morning." "No." Nora's voice was steady. "I'm leaving, Papa, with or without your blessing." Wright's hand tightened on the pistol. Miles tensed, ready to move. The lamp flame flickered, casting wild shadows on the walls. Then came salvation in an unexpected form. The sound of horses outside. Lots of them. Wright's head snapped toward the window. In that instant of distraction, Miles moved. He swept the lamp from Wright's hand, plunging the room into darkness. The pistol fired, the flash blinding, the bullet thudding into the wall. Run! Miles shoved Nora toward the back door as Wright cursed and stumbled in the dark. They burst out into the night, Wright's shouts following them. The horses were where Miles had left them, saddled and ready by the barn. He'd prepared for this, knowing they'd need to ride fast and far. He boosted Nora onto the mare, swung up on his own mount. Stop! Wright had found his way outside, pistol raised, but the darkness was their friend now, and he was shooting blind. Bullets whined past as they galloped away, the sound of Wright's rage fading behind them. They rode hard through the night, pushing the horses as much as they dared. Miles knew Wright would follow come daylight, knew the man wouldn't give up easy. They needed distance, needed to lose themselves in the vast Colorado territory. As dawn broke, they stopped at a stream to rest the horses. Nora slid from the saddle, her legs shaking from the long ride. She'd never complained, never asked to slow down, though Miles knew she must be exhausted. You all right? He asked, watching her kneel by the stream to drink. Better than I've been in days. She splashed water on her face, washing away the dust and fear. Where do we go now? North. There's a trading post about a day's ride. We can get supplies. Maybe throw your father off our trail. She was quiet for a moment, staring at her reflection in the water. He won't stop looking. You know that, don't you? He can't afford to let me go. Then we keep going till we're somewhere he can't reach. California, maybe Oregon. Somewhere far enough that Abner Wright is just a bad memory. You'd do that, go that far for someone you just met. Miles considered his words careful-like. I've seen enough bad in this world to know when I find something worth protecting. Your father's wrong to hold you prisoner, wrong to threaten you. Man's got to stand for something, or he ain't much of a man. She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw something shift in her eyes. I don't even know you, don't know where you come from, who your people are. Not much to know. Born in Missouri. Joined the cavalry at 17. Fought in the war, mustered out 5 years ago. Been hauling freight ever since. He shrugged. No family to speak of. No place I call home except whatever patch of ground I'm sleeping on. That sounds lonely. Sometimes. But it's free. Man can't put a price on freedom. They mounted up and rode on, following game trails through the pine forests. Miles kept them off the main roads, knowing Wright would have men watching. The mountains rose blue and distant to the west, promising harder travel but better concealment. By afternoon, they reached the trading post, a rough collection of buildings at a crossroads. Miles left Nora hidden in the trees while he went in alone, not wanting to draw attention. He bought supplies, quick food, ammunition, a coat for Nora against the mountain cold. The trader, a grizzled man named Elijah Morse, gave him a sharp look. Riding hard, friend. Trouble behind you. Maybe, nothing that concerns folks here. Morse spat tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. Abner Wright was through here this morning. Had 4 men with him, all armed heavy. Said his daughter was kidnapped by some drifter. Offered good money for information. Miles kept his face neutral. That's so. That's so. Course, I didn't see nothing. Don't much care for Wright. Man's got a mean streak wide as the Platte River. Morse leaned across the counter. But if I was running from him, I'd head east, not north. Army patrol came through yesterday. Heading for Fort Collins, safety in numbers, if you catch my meaning. Miles laid extra money on the counter. Appreciate the advice. What advice? We never talked. Morse swept the money into his till. Good luck, friend. You'll need it. Back in the trees, Miles found Nora where he'd left her, holding the horses steady. He told her about Wright being ahead of them somehow, about the army patrol. He must have guessed we'd come this way. she said. He knows the country better than we do.
Then we change direction. Head east like the trader suggested. Find that patrol.
They rode through the afternoon, pushing harder now, knowing Wright was close. The land opened up as they descended from the foothills, wide grasslands stretching toward the horizon. Good for making time, bad for concealment. As the sun sank low, they spotted dust rising to the south, riders moving fast in their direction. Could be the patrol, Miles said, but his hand went to his rifle.
Could be my father,
Nora replied grimly. They spurred the horses, racing across the open ground, but their mounts were tired from 2 days of hard travel. And the pursuit was gaining. Miles could make out individual riders now, 5 men riding fresh horses. Right, it had to be. Ahead, a line of cottonwoods marked a river. If they could reach it, find cover. The first shot cracked across the plains, kicking up dust yards ahead of them. Warning shot. Wright wanted them alive. Wanted Nora alive. Anyway. Keep riding. Miles drew his rifle, twisted in the saddle to fire back. Not to hit anyone, just to slow them down, make them cautious. More shots answered. Getting closer. Nora's horse stumbled, recovered, but was slowing. They weren't going to make the trees. That's when they saw the dust cloud to the north, the army patrol. Blue uniforms visible in the fading light. A dozen men, maybe more, riding in formation. Miles fired his rifle in the air. Once, twice, 3 times. The universal signal for distress. The patrol changed direction, spurring toward them. Wright saw them too. His pursuit slowed, uncertain. He couldn't gun down 2 people in front of army witnesses, but he couldn't let them go either. The 2 groups converged near the river, Wright and his men on one side, Miles and Nora in the middle, the army patrol surrounding them all. The officer in charge, a lieutenant with fresh insignia, looked from one group to the other. What's the meaning of this? Why were you shooting at these people? Wright had his story ready.
That man kidnapped my daughter. I'm trying to get her back safe.
That true, miss, the lieutenant addressed Nora directly. This was the moment. She could confirm her father's story, go back to her prison, or she could tell the truth and risk everything. Nora straightened in her saddle. No, sir, this man, Miles Harper, helped me escape. My father was holding me prisoner. He's done something terrible, and I witnessed it. Now he wants to silence me. The lieutenant's eyes sharpened. That's a serious accusation. It's the ravings of a confused girl, Wright said quickly. She's not been well since her mother died. Makes up stories. Then you won't mind coming with us to Fort Collins, the lieutenant said smoothly. We can sort this out proper, with the territorial marshal. Wright's face went still. The territorial marshal wasn't his cousin, wasn't someone he could buy or threaten. That's not necessary. This is a family matter. Attempted murder on the plains is army business, the lieutenant said. All of you are coming with us. We'll let the law decide who's telling the truth. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Wright's men looked to him, hands near their guns. The soldiers shifted, ready. Miles moved his horse slightly, putting himself between Nora and her father. Then Wright smiled, cold and sharp. Of course, Lieutenant. We'll come peaceful. I've got nothing to hide. But his eyes, when they found Nora, promised this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fire crackled low between them, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. They'd made camp by a stream, far from any trail. The horses picketed where they could graze on bunch grass. Above them, stars filled the Colorado sky like spilled salt on black cloth. Nora sat wrapped in the coat Miles had bought her, knees drawn up to her chest. She'd been quiet since they'd slipped away from the army patrol in the confusion at Fort Collins. Wright had tried to spin his tale to the marshal, but without proof and with Nora refusing to go with him, there was little the law could do. They'd held him for questioning, giving Miles and Nora time to disappear into the night. You should eat something, Miles said, offering her a piece of jerky. She took it but didn't bite.
Do you think he's still following?
Maybe. Probably. Your father strikes me as a man who doesn't give up easy.
He wasn't always like this.
Her voice was soft, almost lost in the sound of the stream.
When Mama was alive, he was different.
He'd laugh, tell stories. He'd bring her wildflowers from the meadow, dance with her in the kitchen when he thought I wasn't watching. Miles added another stick to the fire. Losing someone you love can change a person.
Did you lose someone?
He was quiet for a long moment. My brother, during the war, we joined up together. Thought we'd watch each other's backs. But war doesn't work that way. One minute he was beside me, the next, he shrugged. After that, I couldn't see the point in settling down, putting down roots. Seemed like everything you care about just gets taken away. So you run freight instead. It's honest work. See new country, no one depending on me, no one to let down. Nora finally took a bite of the jerky, chewing thoughtfully. Sounds lonely. Sometimes. He glanced at her across the fire.
Been less lonely lately.
A blush crept up her cheeks, visible even in the firelight. She looked away, suddenly interested in the stars. Where will we go now?
I've been thinking on that. Cheyenne's still our best bet. Big enough to get lost in, far enough that your father's influence won't reach.
I know a woman there, Mrs. Doyle. She runs a boarding house. Good Christian woman. She'd take you in, help you get situated. And then you start over, find work, maybe in one of the shops. Make a new life. He poked at the fire with a stick. Better life than being locked in a room.
What about you?
I'll see you safe to Cheyenne. After that, he shrugged. Got freight contracts to fulfill, life to get back to. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, soft as a whisper, "What if I don't want you to go?" The words hung between them like morning mist. Miles felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of bonds he'd tied tight since his brother died. Nora.
I know.
She pulled the coat tighter.
I know you've got your life, your freedom.
I know I'm just some girl you helped out of a bad situation.
But these past days, riding with you, it's the first time I've felt real, like I was actually living instead of just existing.
Miles stood, walked to the stream and back, trying to order his thoughts. You're young. You've been through a terrible ordeal. It's natural to feel attached to someone who helped you.
Don't,
her voice had steel in it now.
Don't treat me like a child. I may have been sheltered, but I'm not naive. I know my own mind.
2 days ago, you were locked in a room, thinking you might die. Now you're free, and the world's big and scary and new. I'm just the first kind face you've seen. That's not enough to build on. She stood too, faced him across the dying fire. You think I'm confused, think I'm grateful and mistaking it for something else. Aren't you?
I'm grateful, yes, but that's not what this is.
She stepped closer. When you appeared at my window, I thought I was dreaming. Then you spoke, and I knew you were real. And when you came back, when you broke down that door, her voice caught.
No one ever fought for me before. No one ever thought I was worth saving.
You are worth saving. Worth more than... She kissed him, simple as that, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he was kissing her back like a drowning man grabbing for air. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled. Still think I'm confused? I think we both might be. But he was smiling too. This is complicated. Nora, your father's still out there. You need time to figure out who you are without locks and walls.
I know who I am.
She touched his face, gentle as butterfly wings. I'm Nora Wright, and I choose you. Miles Harper. Not because you saved me, because when I'm with you, I feel like myself, the self I was meant to be. He caught her hand, held it. I've got nothing to offer you, no home, no prospects beyond the next freight run. You've got yourself. That's enough. Is it you deserve better than a life on the trail, always looking over your shoulder?
I deserve to choose.
Her chin lifted. Stubborn.
Isn't that what you freed me for, to make my own choices?
He had no answer for that. Instead, he pulled her close again, held her while the fire died to embers and the night sounds rose around them. Coyotes called in the distance, and an owl hunted along the stream. The world went on spinning, dangerous and beautiful all at once. I won't be easy to love, he said finally. I've been alone too long, set in my ways.
Good thing I'm stubborn then.
She nestled closer.
Mama always said I was too headstrong for my own good.
Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman.
She would have liked you.
They talked through the night, sharing stories while keeping watch. Nora told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's gentle ways and her father's slow slide into darkness after her death. Miles shared memories of Missouri, of the war, of the long roads he'd traveled trying to outrun his ghosts. As dawn lightened the eastern sky, they heard horses approaching. Miles was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, but it was just a family of settlers, wagon creaking along the trail below their camp. The man touched his hat as they passed, his wife and children peering curiously at the couple on the hillside.
That could be us,
Nora said softly.
Someday, a little wagon, heading somewhere new.
Could be. Miles found himself picturing it, Nora beside him on a wagon seat, building something together instead of running from the past. Would you want that, the settler's life? I want a life with you. Don't much care what shape it takes. They broke camp as the sun climbed higher, dousing the fire and saddling the horses. Another day's ride would see them to Cheyenne, to whatever future waited there. Miles helped Nora mount, his hands lingering at her waist. No regrets, he asked.
None.
She smiled down at him.
For the first time in my life,
I'm exactly where I want to be. They rode on, side by side now, instead of one leading and one following. The land opened before them, golden grass rippling like water in the morning breeze. Behind them, the past fell away like shadows at noon. Ahead lay Cheyenne, and beyond that, a life neither of them could quite imagine yet. But for now, this was enough. The two of them, the horses, the wide sky, and the promise of freedom. They talked as they rode, making plans. Nora would stay with Mrs. Doyle while she found work. Miles would use Cheyenne as his base, take shorter freight runs so he could come back to her. In time, maybe they'd save enough to buy their own wagon, strike out for California or Oregon, or maybe they'd find a piece of land, build something lasting. I want you to teach me to shoot, Nora said suddenly. Miles looked at her, surprised. What brought that on? I won't be helpless again. Won't depend on locked doors to keep me safe or others to fight my battles. Her jaw set determined. Next time trouble comes, and we both know it will, I want to be ready. All right, we'll start tomorrow, once we're settled in Cheyenne. And I want to learn to read maps, handle a team, everything you know about surviving out here. He smiled. Planning to become a freight hauler. Planning to become your partner. In everything. The word rang between them, full of promise, partners. Not just in love, but in life, in work and travel and whatever came next. I'd like that, he said simply. They rode on through the morning, the sun warm on their faces, their shadows melding together on the trail behind them. Somewhere back there, Abner Wright was still searching, still raging, but he seemed smaller now, less important. A man could spend his whole life running from the past, or he could turn his face to the future and ride toward it. Miles chose the future, chose her, and on a trail in Colorado, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, Two people who'd been broken in different ways began the slow work of healing each other. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But they'd face it together, partners in truth, bound by something stronger than fear or gratitude or even love. They were bound by choice. And that, Miles thought as he watched Nora ride beside him, strong and sure and free, was the greatest freedom of all. The Plainsman's Rest was exactly the kind of establishment Miles knew to avoid. Too many dark corners. Too many hard-eyed men nursing whiskeys and grievances. But the storm had blown in sudden and fierce, turning the trail to mud and making travel impossible. They needed shelter, and this was the only place for Miles. He kept Nora close as they entered, her arm linked through his. The conversation died when they walked in. A dozen faces turning to study the newcomers. Miles recognized the type drifters, gamblers, men running from something or toward it. "Keep your head down," he murmured to Nora. "We'll get a room and stay there till the storm passes." The proprietor, a thin man with nervous hands, took their money quick enough. "Room's at the top of the stairs. Last door on the right. You want food sent up?" "That'd be appreciated," Miles said, already guiding Nora toward the stairs. They'd almost made it when a voice cut through the smoky air. "Well, I'll be damned. Miles Harper." Miles turned slow, hand drifting to his gun. A man rose from a corner table, broad-shouldered and bearded, wearing a deputy's star, Tom Briggs, from Kansas. They'd served together briefly during the war. "Tom," Miles nodded carefully. "Been a while."
5 years, give or take.
Briggs's eyes moved to Nora, lingered. "Didn't know you'd taken a wife. Recent development." Miles kept his voice neutral, but inside, alarms were ringing. If Briggs was here, he was likely hunting someone. And if Wright had put out word... "Congratulations." Briggs smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny thing, though, just yesterday I got a wire about a kidnapped woman. Young, dark-haired, traveling with a freight hauler. Wouldn't know anything about that. Would you?" The room had gone quiet again, everyone sensing trouble. Miles felt Nora tense beside him. "Man can't believe every wire that comes through," Miles said evenly. "Lot of young women travel these roads." "True enough." Briggs took a step closer. "But this particular wire came from Abner Wright. Says his daughter was taken against her will. Says the man who took her is dangerous. I went willingly." Nora's voice was clear and strong. "My father is the dangerous one. He killed a man. And when I witnessed it, he locked me up, mister. Harper helped me escape. That's the truth." Briggs studied her, then looked back at Miles. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth," Nora repeated. "My father killed Samuel Morrison, the banker, struck him down in our home and buried him behind the barn. I saw it happen." Murmurs ran through the room. Morrison was known in these parts, had business dealings all over the territory. "Can you prove it?" Briggs asked. Nora reached into her coat, pulled out a small leather book. "This is Mr. Morrison's appointment diary. I took it from his body before my father buried him. Look at the last entry, meeting with A. Write about foreclosure, Tuesday the 15th. Briggs took the book, examined it. His expression grew thoughtful. "This is Morrison's writing. All right, I've seen it on enough documents." He looked up. "But taking evidence from a crime scene, that's serious business. Miss..." "I was desperate. My father had locked me in my room. I knew if I didn't have proof..." She trailed off. "Where's Morrison buried?" "Behind our barn, where the apple trees died. About 3 feet down, wrapped in a horse blanket." Briggs was quiet for a long moment. The room waited, tension thick as the storm outside. "I'll need to verify this," he said finally. "Send word to the marshal, have them check." He looked at Miles. "You'll both need to come with me." "No." Miles's hand moved to his gun. "We've told you the truth. Now we're leaving.
Can't let you do that. Miles, this is a legal matter now. The law in Wrights County is his cousin. You send her back there, she's dead. Then we go somewhere else. Denver, maybe somewhere neutral. Miles glanced around the room. Too many men, too many guns, and Nora to protect. But if they went with Briggs... That's when the door burst open, wind and rain howling in. 3 men entered, water streaming from their coats. Wright's men. Miles recognized them from the pursuit days ago. "There she is," one shouted. "The Wright girl." Everything happened at once. The men went for their guns. Miles shoved Nora behind the bar and drew his Colt. Briggs was yelling for everyone to hold, but nobody was listening. The first shot shattered a whiskey bottle, and then the room exploded. Miles fired twice, saw one of Wright's men spin and fall. Another dove behind a table, shooting wild. Patrons scattered, some joining the fight, others running for cover. Briggs had his gun out but seemed unsure who to shoot at. The back door. Miles grabbed Nora, pulled her through the chaos. They burst into the kitchen, startling a cook who dropped a pot of stew. Through another door and they were in an alley, rain hammering down. The horses. No time. Miles could hear shouting from inside. New pursuit would be seconds behind. This way. They ran through the storm, mud sucking at their boots. Lightning split the sky, showing them a maze of buildings, sheds, stables, businesses backed up to each other. Miles led them through it all, using skills learned in the war, how to lose pursuit in unfamiliar terrain. They took shelter in a livery stable, pressing back into an empty stall. Horses stamped and whickered, nervous from the storm. Miles kept his gun ready, watching the door. "Are you hurt?" he asked Nora. "No. Are you?" "I'm fine," though his left arm burned where a bullet had grazed it. "We need to get out of town. Tonight. In this storm." Storm's our friend now. Covers our tracks. Keeps them from organizing a proper search. She was shivering, from cold or fear or both. He pulled her close, sharing what warmth he had. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is all my fault." "No, your father's fault. You're just trying to survive." Footsteps outside. They froze, Miles raising his gun. The door opened, and Tom Briggs stepped in alone, hands visible. "Easy, Miles, just me." "Come to arrest us." "Come to talk sense." Briggs moved closer, slow and careful. "2 of Wright's men are dead. The third's talking plenty. Says Wright hired them to bring his daughter back. Promised good money." He paused. "Also says Wright's been acting strange lately. Paranoid. Mentioned something about bankers and debts." "Will you check behind the barn?" Nora asked urgently. "Already sent a wire. Should know by tomorrow." Briggs holstered his gun. "Look, I know you're in a hard spot. I also know Miles isn't the kidnapping type. But 2 men are dead, and that's something I can't ignore." "Self-defense," Miles said. "Maybe. Probably. But it needs to be official." Briggs sighed. "Here's what I can do. There's a judge in Cheyenne, Judge Carter. Good man. Honest. I'll write up what happened here. Send you to him. You tell your story. Let him sort it out. And if Wright shows up, then he'll be arrested for hiring men to kidnap his daughter. That's illegal, even if she is his blood." Briggs pulled out a paper, started writing. "This will get you safe passage. Any lawman who stops you, show them this." Miles took the paper, read it, official looking, with Briggs's signature and seal. "Why help us?" Nora asked. Briggs looked at her, and his expression softened. "Had a sister once. Father was a hard man, too hard. She ran off with a traveling preacher when she was 17. Father went after them, brought her back. 2 months later, she took poison rather than live in that house." He turned to go. "Don't let that happen here." After he left, they waited another hour, until the worst of the storm had passed. Then they slipped out, found their horses at the hotel's stable, and rode into the night.
The rain had faded to drizzle, but the clouds hid the moon, making the darkness complete. They rode careful, Miles navigating by instinct and memory. Neither spoke for miles, both processing what had happened. 2 more men dead. How many more would there be before this ended?
He won't stop, Nora said finally, echoing his thoughts. My father. Even if they find Morrison's body, even if there's proof, he'll find a way to blame someone else, or buy his way out, or...
Then we make sure he can't. Miles's voice was grim. We get to Cheyenne, tell your story to this judge, make it official, and then we disappear. Head west. Change our names if we have to. Build a life where Abner Wright can't find us. You'd do that, give up your name, your work, everything. Already gave up more for less reason, at least this time. I'd be getting something in return. What's that?
You?
She was quiet for a moment. Then, I love you, Miles Harper. The words hit him like a physical blow. He'd been avoiding them, dancing around them, but hearing them spoken plain made them real.
I love you too. Nora Wright, God help us both.
They rode on through the darkness, 2 people bound by violence and choice, carrying their love like a light against the storm. Behind them, blood soaked into sawdust in a nameless saloon. Ahead, Cheyenne waited with its promise of justice or judgment. Cheyenne sprawled before them like a promise of civilization, its buildings reaching toward the sky in defiance of the endless prairie. After days on the trail, the sight of it made Nora's heart lift. Here was a place big enough to get lost in, far enough from her father's influence to maybe, just maybe, find peace. They entered the city as the sun peaked overhead, their horses' hooves clattering on the first real streets they'd seen in days. Miles guided them through the busy thoroughfares, past hotels and saloons, mercantiles and land offices. The air smelled of coal smoke and horse manure, fresh bread and possibility. The law office of Judge William Carter sat on a respectable street, sandwiched between a bank and a newspaper office. Miles helped Nora down from her horse, noting how she swayed slightly, exhaustion catching up with her now that safety seemed close. You ready for this? He asked. She straightened her shoulders, brushed trail dust from her skirts. I've been ready since the day he locked that door. Inside, they were met by a clerk with ink-stained fingers who looked them over with practiced assessment. You folks have business with the judge. Miles produced Briggs's letter. The clerk read it, his eyebrows climbing steadily higher. Wait here, he said, disappearing through a door marked private. They sat on a hard bench, Nora's hand finding Miles without conscious thought. Around them, the business of law continued. Men in suits discussing contracts, a woman arguing about property rights, 2 cowboys settling a dispute over cattle brands. Mr. Harper, Miss Wright. The clerk had returned. Judge Carter will see you now. Judge William Carter was not what Miles expected, younger than most territorial judges, with keen gray eyes behind wire spectacles and hands that looked like they'd done real work. He rose when they entered, gesturing to chairs before his desk. Deputy Briggs's letter makes for interesting reading, he said without preamble. Murder, false imprisonment, pursuit across county lines, a shootout at the Plainsman's Rest. Quite a tale. It's the truth, Your Honor, Nora said firmly. Truth has many faces. Miss Wright, tell me yours. So she did, starting with Morrison's arrival at the ranch, through her imprisonment, her escape with Miles, the pursuit, everything. She spoke clear and steady, only faltering when she described finding Morrison's appointment book on his body. When she finished, she placed the small leather diary on the judge's desk. Carter examined it carefully. This is indeed Morrison's hand. I've seen it on several legal documents. He looked up. You realize, taking this could be construed as tampering with evidence. I was locked in a room, Your Honor. I knew I'd need proof if I ever got free. Carter turned to Miles. And you, Mr.
Harper, what's your part in this?" Miles told his side, the strange feeling at the Wright ranch, coming back to investigate, finding Nora imprisoned. He didn't minimize his actions, didn't try to paint himself as a hero. "You assaulted Abner Wright." "I did, to free Miss Wright." "You fled with her across territorial lines." "To save her life." "You engaged in a gunfight that left 2 men dead." "They drew first. I defended myself and Miss Wright." Carter leaned back in his chair. "Deputy Briggs says he sent word to check the Wright property for Morrison's body. Until we hear back, I'm faced with a decision. Do I hold you both as potential witnesses or suspects? Do I send Miss Wright back to her father's custody? What would you have me do?" "Keep her safe," Miles said immediately. "Whatever else happens, keep her safe from him." "And you, Miss Wright, what would you have me do?" Nora lifted her chin. "I would have you find the truth. Your Honor, send men to dig behind our barn. Question the people in town about my father's dealings with Morrison. Ask why a banker who was owed money would simply disappear." She paused. "And yes, keep me safe, because if my father gets his hands on me again, I'll disappear too." Carter studied them both for a long moment. Then he called for his clerk. "Send a message to Marshal Thornton. I want 2 deputies posted at Mrs. Doyle's boarding house, discreetly. Miss Wright will be staying there." He turned to Nora. "You'll remain in Cheyenne until this matter is resolved. You'll report to this office daily. You will not leave the city." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Harper, you're free to go about your business, but I suggest you remain available. If Morrison's body is found where Miss Wright says it is, you'll both be needed to testify." "I'm not going anywhere," Miles said, looking at Nora. Mrs. Doyle's boarding house was everything Miles had promised. Clean, respectable, run by a widow with sharp eyes and a kind heart. She took one look at Nora and clucked her tongue. "Poor dear, you're dead on your feet. Come along, I'll show you to your room. Hot bath first, then food, then sleep." Nora looked back at Miles, sudden fear in her eyes. They hadn't been separated since he'd broken down her door. "I'll be here," he promised. "Got to see to the horses, arrange for my wagon and goods, but I'll be back." "You'd better be," she said softly. He watched Mrs. Doyle led her upstairs, then stepped onto the porch. The deputies Carter had promised were already there, trying to look casual. Good. Miles had a feeling they'd be needed. He spent the afternoon settling his business affairs. His freight was late, but not disastrously so. His regular customers were understanding, especially when he hinted at legal troubles. In Cheyenne, everyone understood that sometimes the law got in the way of commerce. By evening, he was back at the boarding house. Mrs. Doyle met him at the door. "She's sleeping. First real rest she's had in days, I'd wager." "She tell you what happened?" "Enough." The older woman's face was grim. "That poor child? To think her own father?" She shook her head. "You did right, Mr. Harper. Whatever comes of this, you did right." Miles took a room at the hotel across the street, where he could watch the boarding house. He cleaned his guns, wrote letters to cancel his freight contracts for the next month, and tried not to think about what would happen if they didn't find Morrison's body. Or worse, if they did and Abner Wright found a way to blame his daughter for it. The next morning, Nora was waiting for him on Mrs. Doyle's porch, wearing a simple dress the landlady had found for her. She looked rested, but worried. "Bad dreams?" he asked. "Some." Kept hearing him at the door, trying to get in. She took his arm as they walked toward the judge's office. "But then I'd remember you were close by." At Carter's office, they found the judge in intense discussion with a tall man wearing a federal marshal's star. Both men looked up as they entered. "Ah, good. Miss Wright, Mr. Harper. This is Federal Marshal John Reeves. He has news from your father's ranch." Reeves was a serious man with weathered features and careful eyes.
Miss Wright, he said, touching his hat. We found Samuel Morrison's body exactly where you said it would be, buried behind the barn, wrapped in a horse blanket. The county coroner says he died from a blow to the head, consistent with a fireplace poker or similar implement. Nora sagged against Miles, relief and horror warring in her face. Then you know I told the truth. About the body. Yes, the rest is more complicated. Reeves pulled out a notebook. Your father claims Morrison attacked him first. Says it was self-defense, that he panicked and buried the body. Says you've been unstable since your mother died, that you ran off with this man. He nodded at Miles, and made up wild stories.
That's a lie.
I'm inclined to believe you, Miss, but Abner Wright is a respected landowner with connections throughout the territory. His word carries weight. More weight than a dead body, Miles asked sharply. Bodies can be explained many ways. Carter interjected. What we need is corroboration, other witnesses, documentation, anything that supports Miss Wright's version of events. There is something, Nora said slowly. My father kept a ledger, records of all his dealings. Morrison's name would be in there, along with the debts. If Morrison was coming to foreclose, that would establish motive. Reeves agreed.
Where is this ledger?
In his study, in a locked drawer of his desk. He thought I didn't know, but I saw him writing in it many times. Reeves made notes. I'll have my men search for it. In the meantime, he looked at Carter. What about the shootout at the Plainsman's Rest? Self-defense, Carter said firmly. I have statements from 6 witnesses, all saying Wright's hired men drew first. Mr. Harper protected himself and Miss Wright. No charges will be filed. And Wright himself, where is he now? No one's seen him since yesterday. Reeves admitted. His ranch is deserted. Looks like he packed in a hurry. Miles tensed. Right running meant right planning. A cornered animal was dangerous, but one with room to maneuver was worse. Double the guard on Miss Wright, he said. Reeves nodded. Already done. And Mr. Harper, you might want to watch your own back. Wright strikes me as a man who holds grudges. They left the office with more questions than answers. Morrison was dead. Wright was missing, and the law seemed tangled in its own procedures. As they walked back to the boarding house, Nora was quiet. You're disappointed, Miles observed. I thought finding Morrison would end it. Thought the truth would be enough. Truth's just the starting point. Justice, that's harder to come by. Will it ever end? Will we ever be free of him? Miles stopped, turned her to face him. We're free now, free to make our own choices, live our own lives. Your father can't lock you up again, can't control you. That's what matters. But we're still looking over our shoulders, still waiting for him to appear. Then we stop waiting. He pulled her close. Marry me. Nora. Today, make it official. Make us a family he can't tear apart. She pulled back, eyes wide. Miles Harper, is that a proposal? It's a promise. Marry me, and we'll face whatever comes together, as husband and wife. But the judge said I can't leave town. Don't need to. There's a church right here in Cheyenne. Minister who'll do the ceremony, Mrs. Doyle can be witness. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Nora Wright. Let me give you a new name, a new life. Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. Yes, I'll marry you. They were married that afternoon in a simple ceremony at the Methodist Church. Mrs. Doyle wept openly. The deputies stood as witnesses, and Judge Carter himself attended, giving the union his unofficial blessing. Nora wore a borrowed dress of blue cotton, flowers from Mrs. Doyle's garden in her hair. Miles had never seen anything so beautiful. As they exchanged vows, he thought about the strange roads that had led them here. A week ago, he'd been just another drifter hauling freight across the territory. Now he was a husband, a protector, a man with something to lose and everything to fight for. I now pronounce you husband and wife." The minister said, beaming, "You may kiss your bride." The weeks that followed their wedding passed in a strange rhythm of normalcy and tension. Miles took a job with a local freight company, making shorter runs that kept him close to Cheyenne. Nora found work at Hartley's Dry Goods, her quick mind and pleasant manner making her popular with customers. In the evenings, they'd return to their small rented room above the bakery, and for a few hours, they could pretend they were just another young married couple starting their life together. But the shadow of Abner Wright hung over everything. Marshal Reeves kept them informed of the investigation's progress. The ledger Nora had mentioned was never found. Wright had likely destroyed it before fleeing. Without it, proving premeditation in Morrison's death grew difficult. Wright had been smart enough to spread stories about Morrison's aggressive behavior, about threats made over the debt. Some people believed them. "Your father's got a lawyer now," Reeves told them one afternoon in October. "Samuel Hutchins from Denver, man slick as oil and twice as dirty." They sat in Carter's office, the judge looking troubled behind his desk. "Hutchins is claiming your father's innocence, says he's willing to turn himself in if guaranteed a fair trial."
Fair? Nora's voice was sharp. What's fair about any of this?
"The law requires," Carter began. "The law required my father not to kill a man. The law required him not to imprison his own daughter. What's the law done about that?" Miles put a hand on her arm, but he understood her frustration. They'd played by the rules, told the truth, trusted in justice. Meanwhile, Wright had hired expensive lawyers and was negotiating terms. "There's more," Reeves said reluctantly. "Hutchins is suggesting that you, Mrs. Harper, might have been involved in Morrison's death, that your father locked you up to protect you from prosecution, and you fled to avoid justice." "That's insane." Miles was on his feet. "It's a strategy," Carter said grimly. "Cast enough doubt, muddy the waters enough, and a jury might acquit, or at least deadlock."
"So what do we do?"
Nora asked quietly. "We prepare for trial." Reeves said, "Build our case. Find witnesses who'll testify to your father's violence, his controlling behavior, show a pattern." But finding witnesses proved harder than expected. Wright had been careful over the years, keeping his worst impulses private. The few who might have spoken were scared. They'd seen what happened to Morrison. One evening in November, as early snow dusted Cheyenne streets, Nora came home from work to find Miles cleaning his rifle.
"Trouble?"
she asked. "Maybe. Saw a man watching the store today. Didn't recognize him, but he had that look." "What look?" "The look of someone being paid to watch." Nora sank into a chair.
"It never ends, does it?"
Miles set the rifle aside, knelt before her. "Hey, look at me." When she did, he smiled. "We've got something he can't touch. We've got each other. We've got friends like Mrs. Doyle and Judge Carter. We're building a life." In the shadows, always watching, always waiting. "Then let's stop waiting." He took her hands. "The trial's set for next month. Whatever happens, happens. After that, we leave. Head west like we planned. California, Oregon. Somewhere he'll never find us. You'd give up everything your work here, the connections you've made. I'd give up a lot more than that to see you smile again, to see you free." She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his.
"I don't deserve you, Miles Harper."
"Other way around, Mrs. Harper." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Miles answered it carefully, hand near his gun. But it was only Mrs. Doyle's nephew, Timothy, with a message. "Judge Carter wants to see you both. Says it's urgent." They found Carter's office bright with lamplight despite the late hour. Reeves was there too, along with a small, nervous man neither of them recognized. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper." Carter said, "This is Albert Perkins. He has something you need to hear." Perkins looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I worked for Abner Wright 5 years ago, as a clerk, keeping his books.
Nora leaned forward. I remember you. You left suddenly.
I didn't leave. I was run off. Perkins swallowed hard. I found discrepancies in the accounts. Money missing, debts hidden. When I brought it to Mr. Wright's attention, he threatened me. Said if I ever spoke of it, he'd make sure I never worked again. Or worse.
Why come forward now? Miles asked.
Because I heard about Morrison. Because...
He looked at Nora. Because I remember you as a little girl. Miss... Sweet thing, always kind.
When I heard what he'd done, locking you up, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Will you testify? Reeves asked. Perkins nodded, though he looked terrified. I kept copies of some documents, hid them. They show Wright was in worse financial trouble than anyone knew. He owed Morrison more than the ranch was worth. This changed everything. With Perkins's testimony and documents, they could establish clear motive for Morrison's murder. Show that Wright killed not in self-defense, but to eliminate a debt he couldn't pay. We'll need to keep you safe until trial, Reeves said to Perkins. Wright's got a long reach. I've been hiding for 5 years, Perkins said with bitter humor.
What's another month?
As they walked home through the snowy streets, Nora was quiet. Miles could feel the tension in her, the war between hope and fear. It's good news, he said finally. Is it another person in danger because of my father? Another life disrupted? He chose to come forward, chose to do the right thing. After 5 years of silence,
better late than never.
She stopped walking, turned to face him.
What if the jury doesn't believe him? What if my father's lawyer tears him apart? What if
we trust that truth matters? Miles interrupted gently. What if we believe that justice, however slow, however imperfect, will prevail? You really believe that?
I believe in you, in us.
The rest, he shrugged.
The rest we take as it comes.
They started walking again, but had only gone a few steps when a figure stepped out of an alley ahead. Then another behind them, and 2 more from across the street. Miles Harper. The lead man was big, professional-looking despite rough clothes. Mister, Wright would like a word. Miles pushed Nora behind him, hand on his gun. Wright can say his piece in court.
Afraid he's not much for waiting.
The man smiled, showing gold teeth. Now, you can come quiet like, both of you. Or we can do this loud. Your choice. The middle of the street in Cheyenne, you've got brass.
Got 4 men and a job to do?
What have you got?
A wife to protect.
Miles drew his gun in one smooth motion.
That makes me dangerous.
The tension stretched taut. 4 guns against 1. Nora to protect, nowhere to run. But Miles had learned in the war that sometimes the bold move was the only move. Fire that gun. Everyone comes running, he said calmly. Deputies, marshal, concerned citizens. You might get us, but you won't get away clean. Maybe that's a risk, mister. Wright's willing to take... Maybe, but are you... The gold-toothed man hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, salvation came in an unexpected form. Deputy Tom Briggs, rounding the corner with 2 other lawmen. Evening, folks, Briggs said pleasantly, though his hand rested on his gun. Problem here. The hired men melted away like snow in spring, vanishing into alleys and shadows. The gold-toothed leader gave Miles a look that promised this wasn't over, then followed his men. Good timing, Miles said, lowering his gun. Wasn't timing. We've been following you since you left Carter's office. Figured Wright might try something with the new witness coming forward. You knew about Perkins. Judge told me. Wanted to make sure you got home safe. Briggs looked at Nora, who was pale but steady. Ma'am, you all right?
Yes, thank you.
We'll escort you home, And I think it's time we put a permanent guard on you both. This is escalating." As they walked surrounded by deputies, Nora slipped her hand into Miles. "Still believe justice will prevail. I believe Wright's getting desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Or they do terrible things."
"That too. But we're not alone in this. Not anymore."
At their building, Briggs posted a man at the front and back. "Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow we start preparing your testimony for trial." Inside their room, Nora moved to the window, looking out at the snowy street.
"A month ago, I was locked in a room, thinking I'd die there. Now I'm married, living in a city, preparing to testify against my own father. Sometimes it doesn't feel real."
Miles came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist.
"What feels real?" "This."
She leaned back against him.
"You, us. Everything else feels like a bad dream I can't wake from."
"Then hold on to what's real. The rest will pass."
"Promise."
"I promise. One way or another. This ends. And when it does, we'll be free to build the life we want. Have the family we want." She turned in his arms.
"Family.
"If you want, when you're ready, when we're safe."
I want,"
her voice was fierce,
"I want everything my father tried to deny me.
freedom, love, children who'll never know locked doors or fear. I want it all. Then we'll have it, all of it. Just need to weather this storm first." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Cheyenne in white, somewhere in the territory. Abner Wright plotted and planned. His hired men regrouped. Lawyers prepared arguments. But in a small room above a bakery, two people held each other close and dared to dream of spring. The trial would come. Truth would clash with lies. Justice would be weighed and measured. And through it all, love would endure. It had to. The courtroom in Cheyenne was packed to capacity on the morning Abner Wright's trial began. Word had spread throughout the territory about the rancher who'd killed his banker and locked up his own daughter. People came from miles around to witness what promised to be the most sensational trial in years. Miles sat beside Nora in the front row, her hand gripped tight in his. She wore a simple gray dress that misses. Doyle had helped her choose respectable but not severe. Nothing that would distract from her testimony. Her face was pale but composed, the result of weeks preparing for this moment. Across the aisle sat Abner Wright, flanked by his lawyers. He'd lost weight during his time in hiding, his face gaunt beneath his beard, but his eyes still held that dangerous glitter. When he looked at Nora, she didn't flinch, meeting his gaze steadily until he looked away first. Judge William Carter presided, his expression grave as he called the court to order. The prosecutor, a sharp young man named David Thornton, had been brought in from Denver specifically for this case. Wright's lawyer, Samuel Hutchins, sat like a well-fed cat, confident in his ability to twist the truth. The first days were taken up with jury selection and opening statements. Thornton painted Wright as a desperate man who'd killed to keep his land, then imprisoned his daughter to silence her. Hutchins countered with a tale of self-defense and a father's concern for a troubled daughter. When Albert Perkins took the stand, the courtroom stirred with interest. The nervous former clerk produced his hidden documents, showing Wright's mounting debts, his previous disputes with creditors, his pattern of intimidation.
Mister, Wright told me that dead men don't collect debts,"
Perkins testified, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. He said it like a joke, but his eyes weren't joking. Hutchins tried to discredit him, suggesting Perkins had been fired for incompetence and held a grudge. But the documents spoke louder than words, showing a clear financial motive for Morrison's death. On the fourth day, Nora was called to testify. Miles walked her to the witness stand, whispering encouragement. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and began to speak. She told it all: Morrison's arrival, the argument, the terrible sound of violence, her father standing over the body, the poker in his hand, being forced to her room, the door locking behind her. 3 days of imprisonment, of growing certainty that she would never leave that room alive. "Why did you take Mr. Morrison's appointment book?" Thornton asked gently.
"I knew I'd need proof,"
Nora replied.
"My father had friends, influence, who would believe me without evidence."
"And why did you think your father would harm you?" Nora looked directly at Wright then.
"Because he told me so. He said sometimes hard choices had to be made. Said it would be merciful. Quick. He'd already killed one person who threatened his security. Why not another?"
The cross-examination was brutal. Hutchins suggested she'd been planning to run away with Miles, that she'd seized on Morrison's death as an excuse. He painted her as unstable, ungrateful, a daughter who'd betrayed her father for a drifter's attention. "Isn't it true you were involved with Mr. Harper before your alleged imprisonment?" Hutchins asked with false concern. "No, I'd never seen him before the day he came to buy grain. Yet you fled with him immediately, spent days alone with him on the trail, married him with unseemly haste. I fled with him because he saved my life. I married him because I love him, and because he's an honorable man who offered me protection. Or because you needed a husband's privilege to avoid testifying against your father."
"I'm testifying now, aren't I?"
Nora's voice was steady.
"A wife can't be compelled to testify against her husband, but a daughter can choose to tell the truth about her father."
When Miles took the stand, he was prepared for Hutchins's attacks on his character, his past, his motives. The lawyer painted him as an opportunist who'd kidnapped a wealthy rancher's daughter for profit or worse. "You assaulted Mr. Wright in his own home," Hutchins stated. "I freed Miss Wright from unlawful imprisonment," Miles corrected.
"According to you, but isn't it possible she was simply in her room, that the door was stuck, that you misunderstood the situation?"
"No, sir. The door was barred from the outside, and Miss Wright was clear about being held prisoner." "So you say. Tell me, Mr. Harper, how much did you expect to gain from marrying Abner Wright's daughter?" "I expected to gain a wife, nothing more." "Come now, the Wright Ranch is valuable property. With Mr. Wright convicted, it would pass to his daughter." "We don't want his ranch," Miles said firmly. "We don't want his money or his land. We just want to be free of him." The trial continued for 2 weeks. Witnesses were called to testify about Morrison's character, Wright's temper, the financial situation at the ranch. The prosecution built their case piece by piece: motive, opportunity, consciousness of guilt shown by Wright's imprisonment of his daughter and his flight from justice. Through it all, Wright sat silent, letting his lawyers speak for him. But sometimes his mask would slip, and the rage beneath would show through, especially when he looked at Nora. The night before closing arguments, Marshal Reeves came to their room with troubling news. 3 of the jurors have reported being approached, offered money to acquit. "By whom?" Miles demanded.
"They won't say, too scared, but we can guess where the money's coming from."
"Can they be protected?" "We're trying, but Wright's got resources we didn't know about. Hidden accounts, friends in low places." Reeves looked tired. "I'll be honest with you, I'm worried. Juries are unpredictable in the best of times. With this kind of pressure..."
Nora stood abruptly, walked to the window. "So he might walk free, after everything."
"It's possible," Reeves admitted. "We need to prepare for that possibility." "No." She turned back, fire in her eyes. "I won't run anymore. Won't spend my life looking over my shoulder. This ends here, one way or another." "Nora," Miles started. "I mean it. If the law won't protect us, we'll protect ourselves. I'm learning to shoot. Remember getting good at it, too." "You're talking about taking the law into your own hands," Reeves warned.
"The law had its chance, multiple chances. If it fails..."
She shrugged. "Then I'll do what my father taught me. Take care of my own problems." After Reeves left, Miles found Nora at the window again, staring out at the dark street.
You didn't mean that, he said, about taking matters into your own hands. Didn't I? She didn't turn around. I'm tired. Miles. Tired of being afraid. Tired of being hunted. If they let him go. Then we leave. Tonight. Head west and never look back. You think he'll let us? You think he'll just wave goodbye? She laughed bitterly. He'll follow. He'll always follow. Because I'm the one who got away. The one who defied him. He can't let that stand. Miles pulled her close, felt the tension in her body. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Promise me you won't do anything rash. I promise, she said, but he heard the reservation in her voice, the unspoken qualifier. The closing arguments were passionate on both sides. Thornton spoke of justice, of a young woman's courage in standing up to her father's tyranny. Hutchins painted a picture of misunderstanding, of a daughter turned against her father by a smooth-talking drifter. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom emptied slowly, people reluctant to miss the verdict. Miles and Nora waited in a small room with Marshal Reeves, the hours crawling by. Could take days, Reeves said. Complex case, lots of evidence to review. But it didn't take days. After only 6 hours, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. As they filed back into the courtroom, Nora gripped Miles's hand so tight he thought his fingers might break. Judge Carter called for the verdict. The foreman, a stern-faced rancher, stood. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Abner Wright, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Wright surged to his feet, shouting curses, having to be restrained by deputies. His lawyers immediately began talking about appeals. But the damage was done. Guilty. The word hung in the air like salvation. On the charge of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. Nora sagged against Miles, tears streaming down her face. It was over. The law had spoken. Justice, however delayed, had come. Judge Carter gavelled for order. Abner Wright, you have been found guilty of murder and false imprisonment. Sentencing will be held tomorrow. But I can tell you now that you will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. You took a man's life and tried to destroy your daughter's. The territory of Colorado will not tolerate such actions. As the deputies led Wright away, he managed to turn back one last time. His eyes found Nora, and his lips moved. She couldn't hear the words over the noise, but she could read them. This isn't over. Outside the courthouse, in the cold December air, Nora breathed deep for what felt like the first time in months. It's done, she said wonderingly. It's really done. It's done, Miles confirmed, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. He'll never hurt you again. Never hurt anyone again. She looked up at him. We're free, Miles, truly free. So what do we do with that freedom? She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. Everything. We do everything. They walked through the streets of Cheyenne, past the boarding house where they'd hidden, past the church where they'd married, past all the landmarks of their strange courtship. People called out congratulations, having followed the trial in the newspapers. For the first time, they could accept those good wishes without fear. California, Miles asked. Oregon, or maybe we stay here, build something in Cheyenne. I don't care, Nora said, and meant it. Anywhere you are is home. That night, they made love with an abandon they'd never allowed themselves before. The shadow of Abner Wright finally lifted. They made plans and dreamed dreams, imagining a future that had seemed impossible just hours before. But in the territorial prison, Abner Wright sat in his cell, staring at the walls and planning. He'd lost this battle. Yes, but wars were won by those who endured, who waited, who never forgot a wrong. He had time now, all the time in the world. And somewhere deep in Nora's heart, beneath the joy and relief, a small voice whispered that her father's final words might be true. This wasn't over. Not yet. Spring came early to Cheyenne that year, melting the snow and bringing the promise of new beginnings.
It had been 3 months since Abner Wright's sentencing to life in the territorial prison. 3 months since Nora had finally been able to breathe without fear. The small shop on Maple Street had been Miles's idea. Wright and Harper General Supplies. The sign maker had questioned the name, but Nora insisted. She would not hide from her past, would not pretend to be someone else. She was Nora Wright Harper, survivor and shop owner, and she would build something good from the ashes of her old life. The morning sun streamed through the windows as she arranged goods on the shelves. Coffee beans from Mexico, fabric from San Francisco, tools forged in Pittsburgh, each item carefully chosen, fairly priced. Already, after just 6 weeks in business, they had regular customers. Morning delivery. Miles called from the door, carrying a crate of canned goods. His freight business had evolved too. Instead of long hauls across dangerous territory, he now managed supply runs for several Cheyenne merchants, home every night. The Johnsons ordered extra flour, Nora said, consulting her ledger. Their daughter's getting married next month. I'll make sure they get it. He set down the crate, studied her. You look happy. I am happy. She came around the counter to kiss him. Happier than I ever thought possible. It was true. The nightmares had faded. The constant checking over her shoulder had stopped. She could walk the streets of Cheyenne without fear, could laugh without guilt. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. The bell above the door chimed. Mrs. Patterson entered, a rancher's wife from outside town. Good morning, Mrs. Harper. I need supplies for spring planting. As Nora helped her customer, Miles watched with quiet pride. His wife had transformed from a frightened prisoner to a confident businesswoman. She knew her customers by name, remembered their preferences, extended credit to those who needed it. The shop was becoming a gathering place, a center of community. Did you hear, Mrs.? Patterson said as Nora tallied her purchases. There was trouble at the territorial prison last week, a riot of some sort. Nora's hand stilled on the ledger. Was anyone hurt? 3 guards injured, 2 prisoners dead. They say it started in the section where they keep the murderers. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, lowering her voice. Your father's section. Was he involved? Nobody's saying, but Marshal Reeves was asking questions in town yesterday. Seemed worried about something. After Mrs. Patterson left, Nora found her hands shaking slightly. Miles noticed immediately. Just talk, he said gently. Prison riots happen. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't it? She moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful street. You didn't see his face when they led him away. The promise in his eyes. He's locked up tight. Stone walls, iron bars, armed guards. He can't hurt you anymore. He doesn't have to do it himself. He had friends, men who owed him favors. What if... The door chimed again. Marshal Reeves entered, his face grave. Morning, folks. Glad I caught you both. This about the prison riot? Miles asked directly. Reeves nodded. Your father wasn't involved in the violence, Mrs. Harper, but during the confusion, several items went missing from the prison workshop, including files that could be fashioned into weapons. You think he has them? Can't prove it. His cell was searched, nothing found, but... Reeves hesitated. There's more. One of the dead prisoners was Thomas Garrett. He was due to be released next week. Why does that matter? Nora asked. Because Garrett was in for assault. The man he assaulted. A banker who tried to foreclose on his farm. And word in the prison was that your father had taken Garrett under his wing, so to speak. Miles cursed softly. He's recruiting, building loyalty among men who'll soon be free. That's our concern. Reeves confirmed. We can't prove anything, can't act on suspicion, but I wanted you to know, to be careful. After Reeves left, they stood in silence for a moment. Then Nora straightened her shoulders. We're not running. Not this time. Nora. No.
Her voice was firm. "This is our home, our business, our life. I won't let him take it from us, even from behind bars."
"Then we prepare. I'll teach you to shoot, like you wanted. We'll be watchful but not fearful." She nodded, then returned to her ledger with determination. But as the day wore on, Miles noticed her checking the windows more often, startling at sudden sounds. The shadow was back, faint but present. That evening, they closed the shop early and went to the edge of town where Miles had set up targets. He'd bought Nora a small revolver, a .32 that fit her hand perfectly. "Steady," he coached as she aimed. "Breathe out slowly. Squeeze, don't pull." The shot rang out, hitting the target dead center. Nora smiled grimly. "Again." She practiced until her hand was steady and her aim true. As darkness fell, they packed up the targets and headed home. "Feel better?" Miles asked.
"Some. At least I'm not helpless anymore."
"You were never helpless, just trapped." They were passing the territorial prison on their way back to town. The massive stone building loomed against the sunset, windows barred and walls high. Somewhere inside, Abner Wright sat in a cell, planning and waiting.
"Do you think he knows?"
Nora asked suddenly. "About the shop, about our life." "Probably. Prison gossip travels fast."
"Good."
Her voice was fierce.
"Let him know we're thriving. Let him know he failed."
But that night, the nightmares returned. Nora woke gasping, reaching for Miles, finding comfort in his solid presence. He held her until dawn, neither speaking of the fear that had crept back into their lives. The next weeks passed peacefully enough. Business flourished. Spring planting kept everyone busy, and life in Cheyenne continued its rhythm. But Miles noticed things. Men he didn't recognize loitering near the shop. Questions asked about their routines. A sense of being watched. He shared his concerns with Marshal Reeves, who increased patrols near their shop. But there was only so much the law could do about suspicions and feelings. One evening in May, as they were closing the shop, a man entered just as Nora was turning the sign. He was young, rough-looking, with the pallor of someone recently released from confinement. "We're closed," Nora said pleasantly but firmly. "Just need one thing," the man said, moving deeper into the shop. "Won't take but a minute." Miles stepped out from behind the counter. "Lady said we're closed." The man's eyes flicked between them. "You're her. Ain't you Wright's daughter?"
"I'm Mrs.
Harper," Nora said steadily.
And you need to leave."
"He said you'd be pretty." The man smiled, showing broken teeth.
"Said you'd be proud too. Said to give you a message."
"We don't want any messages," Miles said, hand moving to his gun.
"Oh, but you'll want this one."
The man's smile widened. "He says to remember that walls can't hold a man's reach forever. Says blood is blood, and debts get paid." "Get out." Miles drew his gun. "Now." The man backed toward the door, hands raised but still smiling.
"Message delivered. Y'all have a nice evening now."
After he left, they stood in tense silence. Then Nora walked to the door, locked it firmly, and turned to Miles. "We need to end this. How your father's in prison."
"But his influence isn't."
She moved to the window, watching the man disappear into the evening crowd.
"We can't live like this, always waiting for the next message, the next threat."
"What are you suggesting?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she turned back, her face was resolved. "We need to take away his power, all of it." The next morning, they met with Judge Carter and Marshal Reeves. Nora laid out her plan: investigate Wright's hidden assets, his network of associates, everyone who owed him favors or feared his influence. Cut the roots of his power while he sat helpless in prison. "It's dangerous," Reeves warned. "These men won't appreciate being investigated." "More dangerous than living under constant threat," Nora countered. "My father built his empire on fear and favors. Time to tear it down." It took months, but piece by piece, they dismantled Abner Wright's legacy. Hidden accounts were found and seized. Men who'd done his bidding were arrested for their own crimes. The ranch, which had sat empty, was sold at auction to pay Wright's debts and Morrison's family. Through it all, Wright raged from his cell, sending messages through released prisoners, making threats he could no longer enforce. But with each passing week, his power diminished. One afternoon in September, Marshal Reeves brought news. Abner Wright is dead. Hart gave out in his cell last night. Nora sat down heavily. Miles moved to her side, unsure how she'd react. The prison doctor says it was natural. Reeves continued. The anger, the confinement. His heart couldn't take it. Is it wrong, Nora asked quietly, that I feel relieved? No, Reeves said gently. It's human. After he left, Nora stood at the shop window, watching life pass by on Maple Street. Children played, women shopped, men discussed business. Normal life, free of shadows. It's over, she said wonderingly. Really, truly over. Miles wrapped his arms around her from behind. What now? She leaned back against him, a small smile on her face. Now we live, we run our shop, build our business. Maybe start that family we talked about. I'd like that. They stood together, watching the sun set over Cheyenne, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The sign outside swayed gently in the breeze. Wright and Harper General Supplies, a name that had begun in fear but now stood for something else entirely. Hope, resilience, love. Abner Wright was gone, but his daughter remained, not as his victim, but as her own woman. She had faced the darkness and emerged into light, had found love in the midst of terror, had built something beautiful from the ashes of her past. The door was open now, not locked, not barred, but open to all who needed what she had to offer. And Nora Wright Harper, shopkeeper and survivor, was finally home. As night fell over Cheyenne, she closed the shop and walked hand in hand with her husband toward their future. Behind them, the past lay buried. Ahead, life beckoned with all its promises. And for the first time in her life, Nora was truly free. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Nora and Miles on their journey from darkness into light. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought about their adventure if you enjoyed this tale. Please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And if you really want to help more people discover stories like this one, please hit the hype button to boost this video. Until next time, happy trails.